This episode of Saga Thursday on the Pagan peoples was inspired by the Herkus Monte Saga channel right here on YouTube. Check it out after the video. Hello friends, welcome to Saga Thursday. I'm your host Raj. Today we are doing another faction review, and all the way from the UK, Mr. JP Yaron, I believe is your name, but we can go by JP for some folks.
Yeah, JP is probably easier. I'm actually in the Netherlands.
Oh, the Netherlands. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so correct continent, but I mean, we're not too far away.
Same time zone as the Londoners, I believe.
Actually, we're one hour apart, so
Okay.
I have to correct you there as well.
Well, this is completely derailed now. This is the end of our episode. No. Awesome, cool. Well, we're having you on to chat the Pagan Peoples faction. So this is something from Age of Crusades, and we were kind of hit fast and furious with the Age of Vikings and then the Age of Crusades, and so everybody's trying out their old factions with the new rules. So I think the Pagan Peoples are kind of under the radar, so to speak, at the moment, because it's like a new warband. Potentially need some new models, but I think maybe you could get away with some older ones. But you've recently done up a awesome conversion of these guys. So I guess what kind of got you interested in these fellas?
Well, I was looking for a warband for the Age of Crusades. I've got multiple warbands for Age of Invasions and Age of Vikings, but I was never really interested in the Age of Crusades or the Crescent and Cross book factions back in version 1. Mm-hmm. But once version 2 came out and they came out with the Northern Crusades, that really gripped my interest, since I'm a lot more interested in history from that area. Mm-hmm. And I was actually trying to look how I could do a warband on the cheap. I had a lot of Gripping Beast plastic archers lying around, so it seemed like a pretty good fit, especially with the battle board abilities that we're going to talk about. So it was really just me being cheap and seeing if I could get into all of the era books as well, just to kind of dip my toe. So that's the way it started, and then it just kind of spiraled out of control. And then I broke my rule of not buying any models for the warband and just using things from my bits box. So now it's just kind of blossomed into having all the options multiple times. So that's how that ended up.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, your models look great. We'll probably have some photos under here. And I just want to mention you do have a YouTube channel. I think Herkus Monte, is that pronounced correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a Prussian warlord or the old Prussian, so kind of part of the Pagan peoples that we're going to be talking about. I've fully embraced the concept and the persona of this warband.
Awesome. Yeah, so you have pics, videos of the models. You have some Saga rules kind of stuff with Saxon battle board and faction overview, and you guys delve into some of the history and stuff like that. It's a cool take. And then you're working on some battle reports. So I'll put the link to that below, and we'll probably chat again about that towards the end of the video here. But yeah, so models are very cool. It looks like you kind of have a lot of free reign to kind of do what you want if you're building these guys. They're kind of old-fashioned, in some ways, the fighting style. But they're buying new equipment from their neighbors and stuff like that. So kind of you can do a mix of the Dark Age and the kind of the more Crusades era stuff. And then you've done some little research by these cool helmets. Is that?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about those? Because those are really distinctive.
They're kind of strange, but they've grown on me. So there's not actually a lot of history about who these people were, and just to give a little bit of historical background, the Pagan peoples really cover quite a large geographic area. So anyone, if you're looking at fighting narrative battles in Northern Crusades, you can really use them for the Wendish Crusades, which was kind of one that kicked it off. That's on what's now northern Germany, to the east of the Danish peninsula. If you're looking at Mecklenburg there, that's where you had the Wends. That's one of the first crusades they launched in Europe. And I'm looking at my notes here because I've kind of plundered everything from Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at the time period of middle of 12th century, that's kind of the period that you're looking at, and it's again Saxons, Danes, and Swedes. So it gives you an ability to maybe cross over with using your Age of Vikings models as well. So it's pretty good just to dabble in everything, and you can get away with a lot narratively. The book also makes it clear we're talking about Estonians and Latvians, and even Finnish tribes. So you're kind of going all the way north, up Scandinavia as well. So it gives you, you can basically get away with fighting any battle against any northern battle board, really. So steppe peoples, or Mongols as they're called for this age, the Eastern princes, Ordenstadt, Crusaders, that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no reason not to give this board a whirl, at least with some of your Dark Age models. So why don't we jump into the units we'll be looking at here. So nothing too crazy here. So the Warlord can be on foot, just with your sword and shield, or you could be mounted on a horse with a javelin. The Hearthguards can be mounted with javelins or on foot with heavy weapons. So two interesting options there. There's no regular guys with the sword and shield, so your Hearthguard are going to be armor 4.
No, unfortunately not.
In melee, no matter.
Your guys are going to die if they get into combat. So there's that's one downside. But I think it really shows that it's a hit and run warband. It's very light. But the maximum armor 4 in melee is definitely a downside if you're looking at the mounted warlord anyway.
The warriors can get the sword and shield. They can also get bows. Interesting. Not a lot of factions can take bow warriors. We'll see if there's a reason to do so when we take a look at the board. Kind of a controversial troop type. A lot of folks don't care for them. And the levies do not get bows, they get javelins. So interesting mix of troops here for us to use. So I know there's a unit maximum type working with the board here. So what, when we're thinking about these abilities and stuff, are you usually taking a mix of all the different equipment options here? Or...
So I've tried out multiple options, and the one I've had the best results with are the mounted warlord and mounted Hearthguard, and then warriors with bows. I haven't really found a reason to take the levies with javelins, since you really don't want to get close to people. So kind of getting within M of the enemy without having an option to really move far away again gives you is a serious downside. But one of the main things that you're going to get from looking at this board is just how it encourages you to take multiple small units, anything you do really. So you get penalized if you take units larger than 6 figures. We can maybe dive into the basic Saga abilities, because it kind of, that's the first place it becomes obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you discuss, instead of the Saga bonus dice activation, which they have something a little different down on their battle board regarding that, so it's not completely gone, but why don't you give us the lowdown on that basic Saga ability then?
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun saying the ability names, so I'm sure people will find a way to correct us, but
I get I'm corrected quite on the regular about everything that I pronounce, so right. I'm used to it.
All right, so I'll start off butchering this name. So for a rare dice, you can, as a basic ability, you can play Umber Pirama. That's double I there. So you activate up to 3 units containing a maximum of 6 figures each. So that's replaces your normal what's it called? haven't played a board with it for so long. I forgot what the.
Yeah, I don't have a board handy, and I cannot think of it anyways. But yeah, normally you would trade a rare for 2 Saga dice, but instead you've got an extra option for activating your guys if you can roll that rare. So that's very cool. I think it would interesting. Just kind of my thoughts here right off the bat. So normally it takes an uncommon or a rare to activate your levies anyway. So this could be a reason to take levies, because a lot of times when you take your levies, they almost like sap your board's abilities, because you're using your good dice to just move these regular dudes around and shoot them. So you would look to have abilities of some kind that kind of work with everything else that you can use to activate them. But he said you don't like taking them, so we'll see how that works there. But that would be an option. And that's a pretty cool, that's a solid ability. And since it is a basic ability, you can load that up if you do have.
And if you're lucky enough to roll multiples, then it gives you a ton of dice to put on the rest of the battle board to give you bonuses. Obviously that doesn't happen very often, but using the small units does allow you to normally roll 8 dice per turn until you start losing units, and even if that happens, you've got some abilities to boost it back up.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Taking smaller units, I mean, they're generating more Saga dice, at least at the start of the game, but you're going to be using more dice to activate everybody. So you do need kind of something extra to kind of get these guys going. And yeah, it's really cool. Kind of the flip side of the Anglo-Saxon board here, where you need the numbers. These guys don't need the numbers. What I like about this is you control this essentially because you make your units a 6 and you're done. Unlike the Anglo-Saxons, where you get killed and you drop below and you can't use any of your abilities. Here, you're always going to be able to use them, because when some of your guys get killed, it won't really affect that cap.
Definitely, yep.
So, all right. So very cool. We'll keep that in mind. So yeah, we're gonna have a lot of dice to play with. It sounds like, with multiple small units here. So let's move down to the advanced abilities of these fellas here. And you were up on the first crack there, so I'll do my best with these umlauts here. Looks like Puha Yarv. If anyone wants to jump in and give us a breakdown on all these, that'd be cool.
No, that sounds good.
People across the world butchering these names. So this is an orders ability. Take as many available Saga dice as you have units of 6 figures or less, not including heroes or mercenaries. So that's kind of interesting. A little tick against the mercenaries. Roll the dice and add them to your inactive Saga dice. Okay, so add them to. So this basically kind of replaces the special 2-for-1 rare ability. This does use a rare, kind of interesting. So you point out that you're probably going to be rolling most of your Saga dice for the first couple turns. So this might come in handy later, but 6 figures or less. So basically you're going to get all of your Saga dice every turn, as long as you get a rare.
Essentially, yeah, but the rare dice is really at a premium on this battle board. I mean, some boards you don't care about it so much, but some of the later abilities you really want that horse to come up multiple times. And unfortunately, if you use your if you make a warband with a priest in it, and you switch a dice to a 6, you're not allowed to re-roll or roll further Saga dice that turn. I think the ability is called what is it?
So is no problem. Is the Crusades era
or
priest?
Something? Or,
is he identical to the Dark Ages? Okay.
I haven't compared it. He's pretty much the same, but you. So when you switch your Saga dice, you take a fatigue and switch one Saga dice to a facing of your choice. It forbids you from rolling any more Saga dice that turn.
Okay, yeah.
So it doesn't. You can't combo it up, which is unfortunate. So if you just have your priest hiding in the forest in the back with some units of 1 or 2 warriors still holding on, unfortunately, it's not going to help
you. Okay. Yeah. Interesting options here. One thing, it kind of just having this ability I think it kind of fits the theme of the warband almost, because a lot of time your little warrior units, you might pull them back to save VPs for yourself, but sometimes you just throw them in. But that would be another reason to just kind of get in there, do some damage, and then be encouraged to move those guys out of the way and have these little one-man warrior units, kind of like first edition, potentially generating Saga dice. And hopefully with the Umber Parama ability, you probably would have the activations to spend on just like a little 1 or 2 man unit to get those guys out of the way potentially. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, at the end of the game, people tend not to focus on unless if you're playing something with slaughter points, and it doesn't matter if you completely destroy the unit, then people tend to ignore it because you're going to get 1 shot and it's capped at 2 anyway, even if you double it for some reason. So people probably have better things to do. So even then, it's they'll probably survive just because they're so insignificant.
Absolutely. So yeah, just a little something in your tool chest here to make sure you got plenty of dice here. I do see like there's 3 2-dice abilities, and we said you're going to be using your dice to activate your many units. So okay, well, why don't you pop down to the next ability there?
Yeah, I think this is probably the one that jumps out at most people. So I'll start with the name. It shouldn't be too difficult. Medza Mate.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
That's a mate.
It's an activation. Yeah, it's a common and uncommon dice. So this is foot units of 6 figures or less, entirely located within an area of uneven terrain. So activate your unit to rest. Instead of removing a fatigue, put all the figures in the unit in a different area of uneven terrain. None of the figures may be placed within very short of an enemy. So this is known as the teleportation ability.
Yeah.
Maybe if we're looking at it in a narrative way, it's your units are kind of appearing out of nowhere in the bushes and shooting some arrows, and I think it's become better now that the Book of Battles has come out, since a lot of the objectives people tend to hide away behind forests or behind any kind of uneven terrain, which so forests, fields, ruins, steep hills even, I think, are uneven terrain. So it really gives you an opportunity in the deployment phase to mess with people's minds. And really place the forests in areas where you think you're going to get the best shots. So I would say that the scenario or the placing terrain phase, if you can call it that, is really important for this warband. People are going to try to limit the amount of terrain that you put down, but if you can put down some large, or at least 1 large forest and a large field, that gives you 2 large pieces of terrain that are uneven, which is great for you.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're going to be wanting to max out your terrain just based off this, but you probably have some other abilities. And if you're shooting kind of warband, obviously that's going to work out a little better for you. So you tried to maybe put like a woods or something like in their deployment zone, maybe kind of deeper. It's kind of...
Yeah. It even if you have no intention of using this ability, they feel the need to place a unit inside it.
Yes.
To make sure that you can't get within very short of or you can't place your entire unit within very short. Obviously, with smaller units, it's a lot easier to move them, and here you're limited to 6 figures anyway. So so it's actually quite a small footprint.
Yeah.
So.
I'm gonna say, that very short. That's pretty small. So, they need to put if they want to cover the big forest, like they almost would need to put 2 units in there to use the large one. With the smaller one, maybe a unit of 8 guys could.
Yeah, which severely limits how they can actually move, and I'm not sure anyone. I mean, probably it's very difficult to get someone to cover an entire large piece of terrain with their unit, but the smaller piece of terrain, it's not too bad. And even then, you probably don't even want to teleport in being that close to anyone, since the focus of this warband is really just loads of activations, loads of little attacks chipping away at someone. Unless you use the Hearthguard to charge in, if you have the patience to wait until a unit's somewhat weakened, then you'd really not rolling a lot of dice.
Saw your battle report
it's
there.
A lot of small attacks just chip away. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So just having this ability is going to mess with the opponent, even if you never get a chance to use it. But having that could be quite cool. And if they're gunning for your warlord, you can just zoop, get them out of there, teleport to anywhere.
Yeah. Also, it's not actually a rest activation, but you do move it. It does count as activation, but it doesn't contribute to fatigue. So any further activation you do, like shooting or moving, you're not going to get a fatigue, since it doesn't count as a second activation. One thing you can't do, you can't actually rest the unit, but since you're kind of normally standing in the woods anyway, you might probably won't have any fatigue anyway, or you might have one fatigue because you've shot twice, but that's not normally a big deal. Combined with some of the other abilities that are coming later, it becomes really powerful, but we might just wait for that.
Sure.
Once we get to them.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Another thing would be you can't maneuver and then use this ability. Maneuver is also going to be your first ability. So basically you're using this instead of a maneuver or a rest. So very cool. I'm going to pop down to, looks like Dievs there. Orders reaction, uses a common or uncommon die. Choose an enemy unit. Your opponent decides whether the unit immediately suffers a fatigue or must be activated to move. The stipulation here, this move must take it as close as possible to the nearest board edge. So, interesting ability here. So, yeah, I could see myself using this potentially quite a bit. Just a common die here. A lot of times, opponent has a hammer unit and they want to keep that into the fray. I guess what's your take on this? How do you use this one?
Yeah, I definitely, if I've got a dice to spare, I put it on here. I've used it very often, and my opponent normally sees it coming. But it's generally the only thing you have to watch out for this ability is just measure which board edge is actually the closest, since you don't want to bring it closer to yourself. But unless the unit is the center of the board, most of the time you can get it either to go to one of the sides or back to their own board edge. So obviously you want to check beforehand. One thing one of the ways that you can use it is even if they it stops them from resting in their turn, since it is an orders reaction. So you move a unit, maybe that has two fatigues. They don't want to take the extra fatigue, so they move it. But since it's their first action or activation, they can no longer rest. So it really allows you to keep fatigue on a unit as well. In addition to moving a unit around, and having fatigue on a unit helps you with the shooting later on in the board. So that's a little bit of a combo there. It's a lot of fun. Forcing your opponent to do things they don't want to do is always good. It messes up their plan. You can see how they've loaded up their board and do it at the end of their orders phase.
Yeah.
So you can really screw up someone's plans, and obviously if they see it coming, since if they are astute and look at your board, they might have to waste or they don't know where to put that extra dice. For example, if you're moving some levies, they're probably not going to put an uncommon or a rare dice on there to extra one. So you can mess around with their allocation of dice as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the second ability that can have an effect without necessarily being used, and Yeah, it's tough depending on the composition of their warband. If they are split between Hearthguard, Warriors, and Levy, and you get to choose which one to use, they can't really cover all the bases. So you can kind of chip away at whatever unit, whatever one of those is deficient in dice. If you're playing against just a Warriors warband or something, they might be able to just kind of soak this one up just by having that extra activation dice on there and say, well, I'm just going to take the fatigue, I'm going to rest these guys. But you are true, like they're not going to be able to get rid of the original fatigue with a rest activation. So yeah, great little disruption ability here, especially for a common die, just to be able to mess things up.
I wouldn't use the uncommon dice unless you have something else to do, but for an uncommon dice, it's definitely worth it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you want to pop up to our next one here? Looks pretty.
I'll try this one. So for an uncommon dice, it's Venulik. We'll go with that. It's an Order's Reaction ability again. So place a fatigue on an enemy unit within short of an area of uneven terrain containing at least one of your figures. So again, this is playing with the terrain, or especially uneven terrain.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good if you see a charge coming up, and placing a fatigue can allow you to cancel their activation or reduce their move. So in that aspect, it really allows you to control your opponent's board again, just to ensure that they don't get into combat with you. So that's what I've used it for. And again, if you're placing uneven terrain and large pieces of uneven terrain, it really gives you quite a large area of the board that you're covering if you add the extra short to everything. So all it needs is one figure of yours to be in terrain. Normally you have the whole unit in it anyway, but you can kind of put your toe in an area of terrain if you need to, since being in terrain doesn't give you quite so many downsides as other boards, especially with some of the abilities you have later anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's Order's Reaction. So you'll just be able to see if they have a unit within short of a piece of terrain or not at the, when you're setting your stuff up. There is an opportunity there to go into combat and sort of push somebody towards a piece of terrain to use this on their turn. Usually any of those combos never seem to work out for me, but you can definitely go for that. And just another ability is the third one here where, okay, well now I'm playing these guys, so now I can't put a little short stick around all the terrain and just make sure I don't move into that, unless I have a real solid plan to go in there with multiple activations, take those guys out, and then eat it. So this is another cool little ability. Just kind of nice and I think pretty cool and themey playing against these guys, because it really changes the nature of the battle.
Yep, yeah, and I love the interaction with the terrain as well, since especially with a lot of the warbands in the Age of Crusades have a heavy focus on mounted units.
Yes.
So just being able to put those extra fatigues on something and limiting their movement to short down from L is a huge bonus. So it really slows down the enemy as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm going to head down to, looks like Lima. This is a melee or shooting ability, so looks like our first ability to actually super guys up here. So this is gain 2 attack dice. This is a uncommon or a common. And the enemy unit takes an additional automatic hit for each fatigue it has. Okay, so now that makes sense. You mentioned the opponent having a fatigue was better for shooting, and I wasn't quite sure how that was going to work out since you can't normally use your opponent's fatigue. But with this one, yeah, leave it on there, my friend, and we'll do some damage here. So this looks like, yeah, just a killer ability. Any kind of opportunity to bypass a dice roll is pretty big for us unlucky folk. And yeah, well, great utility here. And definitely more so for the shooting, I would say, but a decent attack ability as well. especially
Yeah,
for...
the 2 dice are fine. I mean, it's nothing amazing, but what really does it for me is the damage from fatigue, and it makes the tiny units of warriors, even if you're down to 1 or 2 warriors, you can still do a lot of damage. Since, my favorite use of this is on a exhausted warlord.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
That's going to be a bad time for everyone there. So it's great also against Hearthguard, anything, people in cover. So it's I love this. If you can do it, you definitely want to place it. It also combos really nicely with the previous 2 abilities, forcing people to move, potentially taking extra fatigue because they're out of place where they want to be, or just staying in place and taking a fatigue, and then also the kind of putting fatigue on people close to you or close to uneven terrain. So this is one of my favorite abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's definitely a warlord killer for sure. Just 1 warrior. Don't have anything on their board to get any die. That's going to take them down 8 times out of 10. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also great even if they're not exhausted and they want to maybe have Hearthguard on foot, and you can just put on hits on armor 5 guys, which is normally a little bit of a problem if you're shooting against people on foot. So it's just great all-round ability.
Absolutely.
And again, it's melee or shooting, so it's just put a dice on it. You're not going to regret it.
Let's head into this one, Percons. This is an activation using 2 common dice. So activate a unit to charge. In the ensuing melee, you get 4 bonus attack dice. So not too shabby here. I would probably go for Lima, the ability we just discussed, before I go to this one, but you're probably going to have plenty of dice to do both if that's your thing there. So not too shabby. You're getting a little bang for your buck because it's an activation ability, so it's going to save you a dice there. But 2 dice, not the cheapest. And so you may get 4 bonus attack dice. So not too shabby. Can't really complain about that one. It's defensive ability, unfortunately.
No, it's probably one of the abilities I use the least, since you can get a lot of attack dice later on in the board, and you might be better off just using those common dice to activate more units of warriors, especially if you didn't roll rare dice. So it's nice if you've got the dice, but it's probably one of the abilities I've used the least.
Yeah. Seems fine, but other goodies to burn here to
yep, definitely
work out here. So I'll let you do the next one. Yeah.
So luckily this is an easy one to pronounce. So it's Arcona. You can use any of the dice facings, which is great, and this is actually the only shooting reaction or any kind of defensive ability on the board. Like I said, it's shooting reaction, so if your unit is within short of an area of uneven terrain, its armor is increased by 2. So one of the things I use this for are the mounted Hearthguard.
Yes.
Since they are so, they only have armor 4 against shooting, so you want to be close to a piece of uneven terrain. It just gives you that survivability. Because there's nothing worse than losing your mounted Hearthguard to some levy or anything else. So it really, this is a lifesaver. I wouldn't use a rare dice on it, or even an uncommon, but for the common dice, it's a really solid ability.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty much going to negate that shooting attack, essentially. They might sneak 1 or 2 things through. They'd really need crossbows to do any damage to you. So, yeah, great defensive ability. Fortunately, just a lot of times the problem with shooting is the multiple volleys against you, but at least one of them you'll be able to soak up relatively safely. So, solid ability there, and yeah, plays in well with the strengths of the warband and the shooting Hearthguard. So, I'm going to pop up to our next one here.
Good luck with that one.
Okay, I'm going to say Savut Amaten. I can't, that's as good as it's going to get. This is a melee ability, uses a uncommon and a rare, uncommon or a rare. And so this is, actually, we haven't seen a rare since the Orders ability. So this is a melee, reroll half of your attack dice, which did not score hits, or all of them if you use a rare. Wow, yeah, nice. Poor man's Uller. I would actually probably say better than Uller. I don't think Uller takes a rare. I can't recall. But yeah, anytime you can reroll dice is pretty huge in Saga. Not that many opportunities to do it, and you're rolling so few dice that you're going to get burned from time to time. So it's nice having this in your back pocket. Reroll half of your attack dice. So do you, I guess as far as like effectiveness, does using the uncommon, or do you always try to go for the rare here?
It really depends. It's a good ability even with the uncommon. I tend to use it, I'm not charging in my bow armed warriors, so the only time I'm using this really is either on the warlord or the mounted Hearthguard. And when you're committing your mounted Hearthguard to a melee, you really want to make them count, especially if you're charging in with the javelins. So you're going to get a reasonable hit rate anyway. So you can really, even without any extra abilities, you're looking at maybe a unit of 6 Hearthguard, 12 attack dice, re-rolling 3 or 4 of them on most units. So it really makes the charge count, since you don't want to be in melee. So if you have to do it, it's a really good ability, especially later in the game. It's a good ability, and it's one of the few. I don't use it all the time, but it's also one of the few ones that only counts for melee. If this was for shooting, it would be even better.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point with the unit sizes here. So when we're picturing Uller, we're picturing the Berserkers or Hearthguard, 8 or 4 with a couple Valhalla, 25 attack dice being rerolled. So it's not quite that level of devastation that we're going to be getting into. So yeah, is there a lot of, I see the next ability also requires a rare, and then the last one is better with a rare, and you're using a rare to activate 3 units at a time. So are you using your rares for the activation ability or for the advanced abilities here generally?
Generally I take a priest, and then if then I roll exceptionally well and then get multiple rares, and then when I don't take a priest, I don't roll any rares. So
yeah, I get it.
I think that's a well-known problem, but I tend to take a priest, so I get at least 2 rares, especially if you're throwing 6 or 7 dice per turn anyway. So I tend to use my rares for the advanced abilities, and normally not unless I rolled exceptionally well for this reroll ability. It'll be quite rare.
Okay, interesting. Well, I will let you chat about the next one then.
Yeah, so this is really one of the top ones that you want to ensure that you use, and we'll talk about why. So this is a common and a rare dice. This is Terra Avita. It's an orders or an orders reaction ability. So until the end of the turn, all your units get 2 bonus attack dice during each melee or shooting attack they take part in.
Ooh, wow.
So this is really amazing for taking your tiny units of bow-armed warriors from an insignificant number of shots to a reasonable number of shots. So you can, with 6 warriors, you start off with 3 bow shots. This takes you up to 5. You can obviously boost it with Lima or any other abilities, but it actually, just given the amount of activations that you have and the number of units, you can really start to pump out some damage at range. I like to keep my warriors in little groups of 2 groups of warriors next to each other, just to give each other a little bit more damage output. So 2 units of warriors are going to be putting out 5 attacks each, and if you can combine this with the Umber Piranha, you're going to have more than enough activations to activate them twice. So 2 units of 6 warriors are shooting 20 times before they before your enemy can use your fatigue. So it really since it's not limited to 1 or 2 activations, you can just use it every single time that turn. So you might be getting 10 or 12 extra dice that turn on shooting.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which is great. So this is really where my first rare dice goes.
I can see that.
Yeah. And it's so standard that my regular opponents know that this is going to happen if I've got rare dice.
Yeah, I can definitely see something like this pushing you towards a priest to keep it going, because it's a big difference in effectiveness between having this up and not having it up. Basically, doubling your firepower essentially here. So yeah, it works well with the smaller units, the multiple activations, and no matter what your plan is here, I think the better bang for your buck is the shooting, but the extra attack dice for melee, if you want to throw in a combat or 2 as well, it's going to serve you well. So yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with this one. It's interesting that actually
so you're not really
a reaction ability too. So if you needed to, you could pop this on the opponent's turn as well. I probably wouldn't see myself doing it that often.
No, I've never done it as an orders reaction ability. Maybe if you run warriors without bows, I'm not sure why you do that for this board, but if you want to try out the board and you don't have lots of bow-armed warriors, maybe. But it's I've never used it in that aspect. No. But it's such a force multiplier. Like if you don't roll this at a critical moment, it really comes back to bite you.
I can see that. Yeah, turn 3 or 4 there, where the balance of everything lies, and it could be pretty sad if you don't get that horse. There could be some tears there. So great ability. I'm gonna do our last guy here. Looks, I'm not sure what, 2 eyes in a row. Kira. This is an activation ability. You can use any dice you want. Activate a unit of 6 figures or less for a move or a charge. Uneven terrain does not reduce this activation's move or charge distance. And if you used a rare, this activation does not generate fatigue. So, wow, cool. Another little, I think, pip towards the mounted Hearthguards here, obviously. Yeah, even just having javelins versus, if there's no other abilities here, the heavy weapon, if you can take a javelin, you might as well just take a javelin versus the heavy weapon. There's so many benefits to doing that. And then this, I think, just puts the nail in the coffin there. So awesome ability here. Another thing to keep the unit sizes down. So I was actually kind of keeping tabs on that. Do you ever run units over 6, or is it always, I mean, there's a few abilities here, but not really that many necessarily to stop you from taking like a 8-man unit.
I've taken an 8-man unit of mounted Hearthguard, and then I've regretted it since I can't use this ability.
Okay.
So I think you're really limiting what you can do, both with foot units, since if you're looking at taking 2 Hearthguard on foot with heavy weapons, you can't teleport them then, since they're going to be above 6, and then they're going to be very, very slow. Yeah. And then you also can't use this to charge through uneven terrain. So one thing that you can do is, if we're talking about foot units, is you can use the Mesomat to place them in a different area of terrain, and then charge out medium without having a fatigue when you arrive.
Okay. So I guess that would be a pip towards considering them.
Yeah, so that's one way of getting around it, but then you're still kind of stuck trying to get back to your area of uneven terrain afterwards. So that's just using any die facing, and then using the rare dice here is amazing if you want to get a lot of mobility from your mounted Hearthguard. Another thing that you can do is since this doesn't reduce your movement distance over uneven terrain, you can go L through uneven terrain with mounted units. Since you only get the fatigue from going into uneven terrain if you actually finish in the terrain, most of the time, especially with smaller units that you're using with this ability, you'll be able to clear the piece of terrain quite easily. So you can kind of pop up at a different side of uneven terrain with your mounted units without people expecting it, and then maybe chain that with an extra activation. Obviously, this is kind of if everything goes according to plan. If you can chain it with the rare dice, you won't have a fatigue when you arrive into combat or anything else, since this is both for moves and charges.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, with that 6 Hearthguard and this ability on the board, essentially nobody's safe really. So a couple thoughts here. So yeah, I think the key is that you charge through it and don't. I could see you being enticed to go into the woods to go after somebody, but since you're going to be, you don't want to plan on losing combat, so you're probably going to be stuck in those woods for the following activations, and then you're kind of really in a tough spot there, trying to move. You basically want to use this ability again next turn to get out, yeah. So another thing to keep in mind, I guess this would be one. Do you need like line? I mean, do you need to be able to see the unit you're charging with a model to?
So, yeah, I was looking into this last night.
Yeah, it's kind of a corner case.
But I can't actually see anywhere in the rule book where it says you actually need to be able to see the unit that you're charging.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, most of the time it's not really relevant since you have to charge in a straight line anyway. But this kind of breaks that particular that rule that they put in place, especially since if you're charging with cavalry, you need to move straight using the L ruler anyway. So you're kind of guaranteed to have line of sight. So this kind of gets around that, and it makes people. I'm not sure if it's broken, but it definitely catches people off guard. And one thing is combined with the Venolic ability, people tend to stay more than S away from the edges of woods anyway, or any areas of uneven terrain. So it gives you a perfect little landing pad to place your unit, which then doesn't end in terrain. So you can kind of arrange your cavalry bases in a way where you shouldn't be clipping anything, any uneven terrain, and getting the fatigue. So I'd like to see if anyone can find a place where you have to be able to see it, but I'm not really. I tried to have a look into it, but I didn't find anything. Okay. So this is a little bit of a corner case you can catch people out on.
Even if you did, you could set up your movement to have one guy be able to see one of their guys. It wouldn't necessarily be too difficult to accomplish that. But yeah, you're correct. I don't believe that there is anything about line of fire or just the wording. It applies to shooting, not charges. Yeah, and then use the rare. Just don't generate fatigue. So have you? I can see myself. Well, you'd have to be swimming in rares probably because there's a couple of really good abilities here. But you could potentially just use it if you don't do the double move without the fatigue and don't even go into the woods. But you probably have better abilities.
It also gives you a really good. You can use your javelins beforehand for shooting out activation. You can stop slightly short and then charge in again. So you get, especially against mounted units who aren't able to close ranks, you can kind of chip away at their combat effectiveness beforehand. Use the rare dice to charge in, and then get less damage back as well. Since you really don't want to go into combat with fatigue, since you're only armor 4 in melee.
Yeah. Good ability. Yeah, I mean, it uses any dice, So you could use this to activate any unit. I mean, I would just have that on there anyway, because you can activate anybody, and then you get that bonus for terrain. You could just even use it on foot guys. I mean, just all around. There's no reason you wouldn't have this one queued up.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and you can get out of the way. Make sure you're not getting into combat with your warriors hiding in woods, since you're going to be moving M and your opponent is going to be moving short.
That little extra scooch.
So, yep. So you can just kind of stay out of range.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, we've gone through all of our abilities here. So, yeah, if we want to maybe circle back around to the army construction. So, you mentioned that kind of trick with the bow guy. So, do you maybe like a point of bows, perhaps in your war bands, or how does that work for you?
I would say between 3 and 4 points of bows.
Wow, yeah.
Can't really go wrong. I know I don't really use bow warriors for any other warband. Maybe the late Romans, they're pretty good in that particular warband. But so it's not really something people see a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think between one thing that really limits the amount of units that you can have are you really want to be able to use a point on a priest.
Mm-hmm.
I've really regretted not taking a priest in the battles, since you always miss out on that 6 right at the critical moment. So just to be able to generate damage, you're relying on rolling a 6 for the Terra Vita ability, which gives you the 2 extra dice for shooting and melee. And then any extra 6s that you roll, you can put on the charge ability we just talked about, or the multiple activations. So maybe I think that makes it really awkward, because then you only have 5 points to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to balance out. Do you take 2 units of or 3 points of Hearthguard, split them into units of 6, or do you take 3 points of warriors and then only have 2 points of Hearthguard? And then if you combine your Hearthguard into a unit of 8, you're really limiting what you can do. You're limiting your movement with the Kira activation. You might lose a few and then get yourself to 6, but obviously that's not something you can plan on. But it's such a good ability to also get you out of trouble by moving through terrain, especially if you're being chased by a unit of mounted knights or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, you almost need to take either no points of Hearthguard or 3 to lock in the units of 6. And yeah, that I kind of think about it when you're talking. The regular warrior guys, I mean, you're probably gonna be leaning into 6 to fit in with your plans here, and Unit 6 warriors isn't really gonna stand up to much, and you don't really have many abilities to really soup them up or anyway. So if they do get into combat, having that 1 pip less of armor isn't going to be it's not going to be a deal breaker. You're going to die or you're not, and then at least with the bows, you're kind of working into your overall battle plan and getting some use out of them. So
so one thing I've kind of focused in on now after some games are the just using units of 5 warriors as well, since it's the same amount of dice.
Yeah.
Once they get hit, they start losing effectiveness really quickly, obviously, but if they do get hit or charged, then you're normally losing the entire unit, or you've got 1 or 2 guys left anyway. So you can for 2 points of warriors, you can take 2 units of 5 and 1 unit of 6, so that gives you the reasonable amount of shooting.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point.
So like you're not reaching your cap of shooting dice at any point anyway, so that's not really a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, I'm looking at 2 points of warriors with bows in the 5-5-6 configuration, 2 units of 6 Hearthguard, and then a priest and a mounted warlord.
Mm-hmm.
Since any time I've taken or not taken a priest, I've regretted it straight away. The Hearthguard with heavy weapons. Again, you're kind of stuck with having to take 3 points worth of Hearthguard, since taking 4 for Hearthguard with heavy weapons. It just doesn't really give you that punch that you can finish a unit very easily. So your any counter attack, you're going to lose a lot of Hearthguard, and then they become worthless, even if you use the teleportation ability and then charging out of terrain with them. It just doesn't give you enough flexibility. I think for this warband, you really need to be harassing the enemy, moving around with your mounted Hearthguard, mounted Warlord, and just getting those shots in and chipping away slowly. So that's obviously the ideal. People have they have boards with the orders reactions and that kind of ability that can thwart you. So for example, like the Polish have the activation reaction where they can charge you before you resolve anything. So if you go in close and throw some javelins, then you're kind of stuck out in the open getting charged. So you obviously have to be very careful, but it's a really fun warband, and it's also good because probably it's the same kind of worldwide. People tend to gravitate towards the Templars and the Crusaders and those kind of warbands. So you're kind of left always playing Templars versus Templars or Templars versus Crusaders. So it's good to be on the other side and have something against it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't, at least in our school, that kind of the Baltic Crusades and stuff, we never really learned that stuff. And then, these guys lost, the war, so, history is written by the winner, so we know all about everybody else, but not much about these guys.
No, these guys have been completely wiped out for the most part. So there's not a lot of people remembering them.
Well, we are doing our part to keep the memories alive. So I guess I kind of wanted to touch on the legendary units and mercs. So with mercenaries, actually, that Tara Avita ability could benefit the merc units out there. Have you ever taken any of those units? I mean, I think I haven't really looked at the Crusades merc units in detail. I know if you could take a unit of Flemish guys for some defensive staying power, you'd probably want to. I don't believe there's an equivalent for these guys.
I haven't, except for the priest, I haven't really used anything else. I think maybe some of the, you're limited by not being able to use the advanced abilities with the mercenaries anyway. So it really kind of, I'm not sure you'd want to, except for the priest. Maybe the Eastern Horsemen, if they can take them, those look pretty fun.
That's what I was thinking there, and I believe that they can.
No, I'm just looking at the table. They cannot.
Oh, okay.
So
well, that would have been the one.
That would be my go-to. You've got scouts and tribal hunters, which might be something to do, but I'm not sure there's nothing really you can take to get around the fact that you're exceptionally fragile warband. So there's that's quite unfortunate.
Yeah, it looks like your options are to take units that are kind of similar to what you already can do, but you won't be able to use the rest of your abilities on them. Okay, so why don't we jump into the legendary units here? Just touch on those guys real quick. Have you used either of these guys at any point?
No, I haven't. We don't really use legendary units, and people tend to not use them for tournaments here as well, so that kind of limits them. But they do have some pretty good ones here. At least one is exceptional, since it kind of buffs my favorite ability anyway. So I'll start off with Vanem Lembitu. He's Estonian. So he is 1 point. He does give you 2 Saga dice, which is really good. He doesn't have any javelins, so he actually has an armor. You can take him mounted, and he can have an armor of 5. So that's already a lot better than anything else in your warband. He's got an aggression of 6, and then he can either be mounted or on foot. He's got all your standard warlord rules, and one thing that he does do is called Guerrilla. So while Vanem Lembitu is on the table, your units gain 3 bonus attack dice instead of 2 when you trigger the Terra Avita ability. So that makes that ability even better.
Wow, yeah.
So yeah, you are running against the the kind of the not being able to double your shooting or your attack pool by that time for the small units, but it really doesn't matter since you going from 5 to 6 attack dice for each shooting activation you have is pretty amazing, since you're going to be doing that ability anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, and you're not losing any dice since he's generating 2 anyway. So there's really not a lot of downsides. Another thing you can do is it's called the main attack. So during one of your or once per game, you may use this ability during one of your activation phases. All your units activate immediately without discarding any Saga dice. This activation does not generate fatigue. Also, if it hasn't been triggered thus far or so far this turn, you may immediately trigger the Terra Evita ability without discarding any dice. So yeah, for one turn you can just load up on advanced abilities and go all out.
That's amazing.
So
yeah,
I don't think this is particularly well balanced,
No.
especially looking at the next ability.
Yeah.
So it's called Aid Came Too Late. If Lembito is removed as a casualty at the end of a melee or shooting attack, immediately deploy a unit of 4 mounted Hearth Guards with javelins within very short of your table's edge, and at least very short from any enemy figures. They may be activated from your next activation phase onwards. So if he dies at the end of your opponent's turn, you've basically got your points worth of Hearth Guard back. So it's probably one of the reasons they don't let legendary units in tournaments. It's one there really is no downside for it.
Yeah, they're gonna get the VPs for them, I guess, but not too bad having you in Hearthguard after you've done the main attack there, maxing everything out. So yeah, that dude's pretty awesome.
Yep, definitely. And he's also armor 5. He doesn't shoot. That's one downside, but you can actually get stuck in quite well with him, I suppose.
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely a character you want to pick when you're down at the shop. Hey, I just want to try this guy out here, see if he's any good. What do you say? So that guy's awesome. I'm going to talk about Niklet Last Knaze of the Oberdites. He is a legendary fella. Replace your warlord for a point. He can be footer mounted as well, and he is also not equipped with javelins. It looks like he's got the standard abilities. He does generate the second Saga die. So let's see what he's got to compare to Mr. Venom here. As long as they're more than long away from any other friendly figures, units in Nicholas Warband do not suffer fatigue at the end of a melee. As long as they're more than away from any... Okay, so if you're sending out a strike force that's far away from all your other units, I guess you won't suffer fatigue at a melee. At the start of each of your activation phases, you may choose an enemy unit and a friendly unit containing at least as many figures. Neither of these units may be activated to charge or shoot before your next activation phase. So, wow, there couldn't be a bigger difference between two special characters. You basically start at each of your activation phase.
Yeah, so I'm not sure this one's really worth it, especially when you're looking at compared to Venom.
They contain before your next. Say you can, well, if your opponent has like a Death Star Hearthguard type unit, I guess you can essentially shut those guys down each phase, as long as you have a unit in your backfield to correspond with those guys and just sit there and match them. But
yeah, it might be worth having a unit of 8 warriors just to be able to shut down a Death Star unit of Hearthguard.
8 Hearthguard, yeah. But then it's really not even working into your game plan necessarily, because you have the 8-pack and then they're also not doing anything. And then to Stubborn Resist, that's kind of a corner case, I think. It'd be good for your sending out the Hearthguards to do some crazy damage, but you'll still be getting fatigues for the multiple activations. So eventually they will be shut down. So yeah, nothing to compare to our other guy over here. I have to say. So wow, okay.
Also, it doesn't sound like a very fun thing to do to your opponent either, since just taking a unit off people probably stop playing with you after a while.
Yeah, people will let you do whatever you want as long as they get to roll some dice in return,
That's
and
right,
you're stopping them. So, okay, cool. So overall, looks like a pretty fun warband to play, I guess, as far as power or win ratio. How are these guys doing for you?
Not super well.
Okay.
It's
Fragile,
kind of
yeah.
they're very fragile, and I'm still learning the warband, and really, if you place your units in the play somewhere that your opponent can get to, or you don't expect a long charge or something like that, you'll lose them very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm about 50% now, so not horrible, but it's not like Welsh or Norman's pre-FAQ levels.
Absolutely.
But it's just it's just so completely different from any of the Knights or Templars or Crusaders type factions that it's a great little something to do. And you probably have a lot of models you can use anyway for this, if you're not too worried about historical accuracy anyway. It just needs some lightly armored people. Maybe some mounted Welsh you can probably get away with as well, and some you can kind of promote your levies with bows from the Dark Ages to warriors.
The Gripping Beast plastic archer set. You should. Is there 30 guys in that box? I can't recall.
Yeah, it's really good
value.
It
should be enough.
That's basically half your. That's half your warband right there.
So get the priest, mounted Hearthguard, the warlord, and a box of those. We'll see you through.
And you're good to go.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think they did a good job of having an alternate kind of play style for those factions and kind of fit the theme in. I think this is a warband that does best probably in the Clash of Warlords scenarios, more like a straight up fight where you can stick to playing your game, and if you don't come out of the woods, it's not necessarily gonna hurt you. Okay, we'll just have a low scoring game perhaps if you don't want to come and play with me. But if we have to go out and get baggage and capture whatever stuff, I mean, you do have some options here, but getting your archers in the open there, it's not going to be a good recipe, especially against the other Crusades factions.
Absolutely not.
Running around and easily running these guys down.
So one thing that I probably need to send an email to the studio Tomahawk, because I can't believe they meant this to be, but if you're looking at the objectives or baggage scenarios where you actually capture the objective and try and haul it back to your board edge, you count it as being an uneven terrain.
Yeah.
So if you're in uneven terrain, you can obviously teleport, which is not something I think they meant to happen.
That might be.
I mean, I'm sure you could rules lawyer it, but it's I don't think it's I think that's going to get shut down pretty quickly if people start doing that.
Wow, that's a good point. I got to use every advantage you can get here.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point with Metamat, the teleporting, and then actually the Kira ability would be great for your Hearthguard going in, taking an objective, and then totally not being completely hampered, because you could use that to move off at least once per turn without getting a reduced movement or a fatigue penalty. So some options there. That's a good point with the teleport. Zoop! See you guys. We're out of here.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's appropriate for good game votes, but well, I think there needs to be maybe a little clarification on that.
Mm-hmm.
But really, if you're any scenario where you're slogging it out with the opponent's warband, you're probably going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So you really want to hopefully choose a scenario where you can kind of stay off a little bit. If you're defending an objective, you need to make sure it's somewhere hidden in the woods or close to woods. So luckily, there's a lot of scenarios like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the feasting and pillaging one. That luckily we haven't rolled that one to play yet, but I can imagine that's going to be a real uphill battle there.
Yeah, I would definitely say so as well. So, yeah, fun fun to give it a shot. It's definitely going to be different from everything else that you've played, especially in the Crusades era. And you think these guys would be all right in the Viking Age, or even Age of Invasions? Want to get crazy?
Yeah, I think the power level, you're probably under Welsh level as well. Yeah. So if given the amount of shooting that they have and extra movement abilities, I think nobody should really have a problem with it.
No, yeah, and I think especially with the bow warriors, they're weaker against shooting, and then they're not, the problem with those guys, they can come back at you with the +1 to hit, and they can do a surprising amount of damage where you don't have to worry about that with the bow guys. They're easy to shoot, and then they don't really have any chance in melee versus the javelin guys. So they don't. Yeah,
so maybe that's one reason for using the javelin armed levy. There might be some wisdom to using them after all. Yeah,
potentially. +1 to hit. I don't think it would hurt your plan necessarily. Take those guys, and so I mean they're going to be coming at you anyways, and I could see potentially matching a levy unit with a warrior unit, and making sure the levy unit is always the first one that they run into. You know what I mean? And then
it's a little speed bump.
Little speed bump. The armor's a little better, and as long as they're in range, they can shoot just as well. So I don't think it would hurt your plan. Maybe something to look into, but you could easily max out their little attack pool. It's only 2 attack dice. It's not going to make much of a difference.
Yeah. Again, you're
+1 to hit.
You're kind of stuck with taking 6 levy is going to be a little risky.
So
if you want to get into combat with that.
But you can do kind of like a Norse scale thing here, where you go in with your levy, and they're going to take an additional automatic hit for each fatigue. It could be good. It could be decent. Not as good as what the Norse scales can do with their levy, but options there. So awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to go over these guys. I didn't really know too much about them, but they look pretty cool. And if you have some Dark Ages guys, it's not going to be much trouble to run some pagan peoples, and it could be a pretty fun game. So thanks again.
Thank you.
What's after these guys? Are you going to run these guys for a while, you think?
I'm having a lot of fun. I'm also building up a Grand Duchy of Lithuania force.
Nice.
It's kind of in the pagan theme. It uses the Eastern Princes board, but you're kind of stuck with mounted Hearthguard with javelins again, which is perfect since it's just a direct kind of using the figures I have at the moment. It's got the little war wagon figure that seems really interesting as a kind of a defensive bunker and a decoy unit with the resilience 2. So that might be interesting to give those mounted Hearthguard a little bit more survivability to be able to kind of hide behind a unit that attracts all the charges.
So you're going to use the models you've done for the Pagan, the mounted Hearthguard, and carry those over into those guys?
Yeah, it's relatively, essentially you're just, it's a little bit later time period, but they're pretty much the same people fighting against the Ordenstadt and the Crusaders anyway, so the technology levels are quite similar.
Okay, cool. Natural extension for you. Well, I can't wait to see the expansion to these guys. You're a great hobbyist and modeler, and
thank you.
It's very cool. So, once again, you can check out JP's little page here, YouTube, Herkus Monte. He's got videos of his models, some faction reviews, and some battle reports as well. You can see the pagan peoples in action. You can see the Hearthguard on foot with the Dane axes. You get to see those guys.
Yeah, see how that ended up for them.
See those guys in play. Yeah, I think it's definitely, depending if you know the scenario going in, whether or not you might get some mileage out of those guys or not. Okay, well, I think we have talked enough about these guys. If anyone has any feedback on what we've discussed, wants to chime in, if they've given these guys a run, please post below, and we'll get back to you. But otherwise, I think that is it for today, and hope you guys have a great week. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye. Saga!